Sony FX5 versus FX3. You're looking at these cameras and you're wondering which one you should buy, or should you upgrade from the FX3 to the FX5? Well, that is what we're going to be talking about in this video, and I'm going to be breaking down the biggest differences that will actually affect you as a filmmaker and help you figure out which one of these cameras you should buy. At first glance, the FX3 and FX5 look very similar, with the FX5 being just slightly thicker, but weight-wise, they are very close. The FX5 is only about 5% heavier than the FX3. And side note, by the way, because I know you're probably already getting ready to comment, yes, I am using an FX30 because I don't have an FX3 handy, but the FX3 and FX30 share the exact same body. Now, turn on the cameras, and here's where you're going to see a big difference, because the FX3 pulls a lot of its DNA and styling from the Alpha photo camera line, while the FX5 pulls a lot of its DNA from the Venice and Cinema camera Sony line. And what this means is that the FX5 is really a stepping stone camera, meant to get you more familiar with how Sony's higher end cinema cameras work. So if you wanted to upgrade from an FX5 to something like a Burano, it would be a very easy transition because the buttons and interface are so similar. Keeping with this DNA sharing trend by the Venice, the FX5 is also the first Sony cinema camera that is not one of their ultra high-end ones to be capable of recording raw video internally. This camera records the same XOC and LT codec as these high-end cameras in 16-bit RAW, and it looks incredible. And so this camera should mix incredibly well with footage from those cameras if you were shooting on a bigger production. Even better, the compression for the FX5's raw footage is very good and results in file sizes that are not much larger than the non-raw footage that you would be filming with the FX3, some of which you can record even with an SD card in RAW that you may already own. Alternatively, then, you have the FX3, which is not capable of recording raw video internally, but it still gives you a really great image that filmmakers have loved for many years. And if you want to record raw externally over HDMI from the FX3 in 16-bit, it will output it, but then it's going to get down converted to 12-bit on the recorder from Atomos or Blackmagic. I have to point out, too, there is a very big difference in the colors that you can record between the internal 10-bit of the FX3 and the 16-bit RAW of the FX5, because while the FX3 is no slouch with 10-bit being able to record over 1 billion colors, 16-bit RAW on the FX5 can record over 280 trillion colors. It is such a jump and gives you so much more flexibility when color grading, so keep that in mind. Next, let's talk resolution. With the FX5, this camera can now record in 5K resolution at up to 60 frames per second in RAW, unlike the FX3 that is limited to 4K. The FX5 is similar to the FX3 though, in that if you do not record in RAW, you will be limited to recording in 4K just like the FX3. Next, what have filmmakers been asking for forever? Open gate recording. And I'm so happy to tell you that the FX5 is capable of recording in open gate in the 3:2 aspect ratio in 5K in RAW, and Sony says they're also working on a firmware update to bring open gate recording to XAVCSI as well. Sadly, this is not a feature that the FX3 ever got. Now, what about frame rates? Well, like I said earlier, the FX5 can record up to 60 frames per second in 5K and in 4K at up to 120 frames per second, just like the FX3 can. But another area where the FX5 stands out from the FX3 is that Sony says that they're working on an update that will add 4K recording up to 240 frames per second to this camera in 2027, which is crazy and so exciting. Everything's gonna be in slow motion. Now, a lot of other Sony cameras that are not the FX3 or A7S III have the ability to record a super 35 crop of this camera sensor, which basically operates as a free zoom and gives you extra versatility when using different lenses. But this is a feature that never made it to the FX3 due to the lower megapixels of the sensor and never had enough to crop in without losing quality. But with the FX5, on the other hand, this camera has a new 16 megapixel sensor, which means that it has enough resolution for this Super 35 crop to work, and it works very well. Next, do you want to give the FX3 a win? Yeah, let's give the FX3 a win here. Remember that the FX3 pulls more of its DNA from the Alpha camera series, so this camera is actually capable of taking raw photos, which is great. But with the FX5, on the other hand, this is a video camera, and the purest sense of the term. And it is actually incapable of taking still photos. It has a button that looks like you'd be able to take some photos with it, but it doesn't work for that. Sorry, no photo capability here, just video. That said, Sony says that they are working on a firmware update that will add the ability for you to take screen captures from your videos in camera. In short though, don't buy the FX5 for raw photography unless you want to record raw videos and then pull stills from that. Now, what about low light performance? The FX3 was absolutely legendary for its dual ISOs at 800 and 12,800, but one of the biggest complaints is that there wasn't a base ISO in the middle. It was a big gap between both of those ISOs. So what's great is that with the FX5, Sony has added a third base ISO at ISO 4000, which is really the Goldilocks ISO level. It's not too bright, it's not too dark, it works great, and it's probably what you're gonna have your camera on a lot of the time. Even better, one of the biggest complaints with the FX3 was that it was not possible to disable the noise reduction when filming at high ISOs, which could make the image look mushy. But go into these settings here, scroll down a little bit to the noise suppression setting, and check this out. With the FX5, you can actually completely disable the noise reduction if you want to, just like you can on higher end Sony cameras. This is a fantastic upgrade. Now, one area where people really didn't have any complaints with the FX3 as far as I saw was in regards to dynamic range. It has been really great with over 15 stops here, but the FX5 joins the A7R6 and includes a feature called dual gain. And you can go to it by going here to the base ISO and going here and selecting ISO 800 dual gain. And the way this works is it essentially combines the different base ISOs into one video, giving you more highlight and shadow detail and improving the dynamic range of this camera up to over 16 stops, which I have to say is really impressive. And it gives the FX5 easily the best quality video and dynamic range that I've seen from any Sony camera other than the Venice and Burano. It is so good and noticeably better than the FX3. Another area where the FX5 is noticeably better than the FX3, and this is something you're probably gonna notice first whenever you use the camera because it's very obvious, is the screen. It is massive. The FX5 screen is significantly larger, and more importantly, it is in the widescreen 16:9 aspect ratio, which is probably what you're gonna be filming in most of the time, as long as you're not shooting an open gate. And so by giving you this aspect ratio, the image preview fits the screen so much more while you are filming. And if you turn off all the controls, look at that, just a nice full screen view. Oh, it looks so good. This is such an immersive filmmaking experience. Throw in the ability for the screen to also tilt up and down as well as out. And this screen is really a huge upgrade over the FX3, which can only rotate in and out. And it's also smaller. It's fine. It's still good, but wow, FX5 screen, fantastic. Great work, Sony. Now, speaking of smaller screens, the FX3 never came with an EVF. There was no way, no iCup, no nothing like that. And I thought that Sony was gonna take the tilting EVF from the FX2 and put it on the FX5, but they opted instead for a detachable EVF that is sold separately, and I love that this is optional. Another optional feature is the XLR handle, which adds 32-bit float audio recording to the FX5. With the FX3, you were required to purchase XLR handle that came with it, but the FX5 handle is sold separately, which helps keep the price lower, Sony says. But I always really liked how the handle was included with the FX3, so that's a bit of a bummer, and I want you to remember that it is included in the price whenever you're looking at the price of these two cameras. Okay, rapid fire feature time, because we got a lot more to talk about. With the FX3, you get one tripod mount on the bottom, while the FX5 gives you two, which can really help with stability and keep the camera from rotating on a tripod. The FX3 also has one USB Type-C port on the side and one micro USB that is really called a multi-interface port, and you can use it for time code and remote control the camera, etc. It's like Sony's custom port, but it's basically micro USB. Well, FX5 says, hey, here's two USB-C ports, and we also have a new USB Type-C time code cable that you can use, so you don't have to worry because there wasn't a time code cable that worked with USB-C before this. In addition, the FX5's added thickness also gave it room to add an Ethernet port as well, which if you use Sony cameras for remote shooting, this will be interesting for you. Now, the FX3 had fantastic autofocus. It's still so good, but the FX5 improves it even more with their Bion's XR2 processor with a built-in AI chip that enables even more accurate and faster autofocus. It's fantastic with both these cameras, but even more fantastic-er for the FX5. But that said, as far as autofocus goes, there is another difference here if you dive into the settings, because you go in and you're saying, okay, I want you to focus on an animal or a bird on the FX3. And even though it lets you select it in the menu in video mode, this does not work. The camera will only focus on humans. But the FX5, on the other hand, you're like, well, does that the same way? No, Sony fixed it. Thank you, Sony. That is great news, because if you go in here to your settings, to your focus, you can go in here and choose it between humans or animals or birds, and it will actually do it, and it works really, really well, and it's very accurate, which is great. Now, both the FX3 and FX5 support Sony's lossless clear image zoom technology, but the FX5 improves this even more by enabling clear image zoom to work in conjunction with your zoom lenses, which can essentially turn your 70 to 200 millimeter lens into a 70 to 300, for example, which is pretty great. Now, we are almost done with the rapid fire here, but we have a few more. One of the biggest complaints of the FX3 over the years was the lack of exposure tools. Other than zebras, that's about what you get with this camera. But the FX5 improves on this immensely. Press this button right here, and you've got false color built in. It looks really, really good. And you're telling me that that's great. But what about vector scopes and waveforms? Go down here, press this. Okay, there's your waveform settings. You want to view that? Okay, there's your waveform. Cool, tap again. There's your vector scope. All available there for you to view, built into the camera. Finally, Sony, we've been waiting and begging for this for a long time, just like with OpenGate. I'm glad that it is finally here, and it makes this camera feel far more professional. Now, in-body image stabilization has also been improved over the FX3 with the FX5, and it will better handle camera roll, and you also get this really nice level on the side that's just always there if you tilt the camera. I love it. It works so well. Now, FX5 has also been improved in the area of supporting Sony's dynamic active stabilization, which basically mimics a gimbal, so that's cool if you're filming handheld. Even more interestingly, you can send your FX5 into the Sony Service Center, and they will lock the sensor. So it will basically remove IBIS from the camera, because even with IBIS turned off, this sensor can shake some. So if you have it turned off, they will actually lock the sensor so it cannot move. And then if you want to use it for like a crash camera or something like that, it will work so much better for that use case. And this is something that honestly filmmakers have been asking for, and it's really nice to have Sony offer this as a feature. I'm also happy to tell you that whenever I tested overheating with the FX5, it performed just as well as the FX3, even with its higher bit rates and data. You can film with both these cameras in extremely hot temperatures with the confidence that neither of them is going to overheat. Really, I was recording 5K 60 full RAW, not even a sign of overheating. It's great. Now, as far as battery life goes, people never really complained about the battery life on the FX3. It was quite solid, but the FX5 improves even more with 20 minutes longer battery life than the FX3. This thing just keeps on rolling. The only con is that to get this extra battery life, it has to use Sony's new proprietary NPSA 100 style. So unfortunately, if you also own a lot of Sony batteries, they will not be compatible with this new camera. So, which one of these cameras should you buy? The FX3 or the FX5? Or should you consider upgrading from the FX3 to the FX5? Well, clearly, the FX5 has a lot of upgrades, but that doesn't diminish what an absolutely legendary camera the FX3 has been for many years. And the fact that Sony is still selling it alongside the FX5 tells you how good it is. They know people are going to keep on buying this camera. So here's my take. If you have no interest recording raw video and you want an absolute workhorse of a camera that's going to be extremely reliable and give you a great image in a ton of situations, plus you want to take raw photos, I would still go with the FX3. It is such a great camera to this day, and while it costs $4,300 new at the time of recording this video, you can usually find one on sale or used for cheaper because it's been around for a while. So I'd try to not pay full price. But if you want to film in raw video and you want to basically have a future-proof camera that you will not have to upgrade from for many years, same gorgeous 16-bit internal RAW as the Sony Venice, 32-bit float audio recording with the XLR handle, 5K recording resolution, a better screen, better autofocus, external EVF, etc. And if I think that you calculate out all of the added cost of the FX5 for the other accessories like the XLR handle and some memory cards and new battery, etc., let's say it costs $2,000 more. Well, yes, the FX5 is going to cost you more, but if you consider that you're probably going to own it for at least 5 years, divide that cost by 5 and you're looking at only $400 per year. And if you're a working filmmaker who can make that back in paid gigs, that's where the FX5 starts to make a lot more sense. And hey, you can use this argument with your girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, lover. Tell them that you're going to make it back in paid gigs and that Matt gave you permission to buy the FX5. So that makes it okay, right? Just saying, you can use that argument if you want to. What do you think? How do you think I'm convincing my wife here? Anyways, if you want to see my comparison of the FX5 with the Nikon ZR, which I've also made, I will link to that video down in the description. I'll also link down there to my full review video of the FX5, as well as my memory card cheat sheet that I put together, which is going to show you the exact memory cards you need to buy for the different camera formats, and it's going to help you save money by buying the correct memory card. You can download this guide completely for free at the link in the video description. Thanks so much for watching. Please consider liking this video and subscribing if you want to see more videos about filmmaking and the FX5. I have a lot more coming. It's kind of wild, but this camera's really great. Thanks. Have a great day.